I'm Sheryl. I'm at Altona Schoolhouse again at Highland Valley Ranch. And this was a very important building to a one-room schoolhouse back in the old-fashioned days. Doesn't look like much, maybe kind of like a garage, I don't know. And that's kind of what it was. This was actually the coal shed and also the place where students who brought horses to school and rode horses to school would keep their horses during the school day. And so it doesn't look like too much, but it was big enough that they could put their horses inside. Probably had a different door, maybe a double door so they could lead their horses in. They would also store coal there because heating coal in a stove, lighting coal in a stove on fire would be the way that you would heat the school on cold winter days. So right here, I have a coal bucket. Sometimes I think these buckets were called coal hods. So do a little research, see if it was called a hod, H-O-D. I think maybe it was. And inside my coal bucket, I have a shovel that you could use to shovel coal in and out of that hot wood-burning stove in the schoolhouse. I also have a piece of coal. And so you can see it's a pretty big piece of coal. Who knows if all the pieces that they burned in the stove were this big? Maybe some were smaller, depending on the size of your stove and the door that you had to open to put these into your stove to light them on fire. And so like I said, kids would also ride horses to school sometimes. And so this would be kind of like a barn or a stable for their horses while they were at school. Now, what were other ways that you got to school at a one-room school? A one-room school was not in a city, it wasn't in a town. Sometimes it would be in a little community like Altona, but not somewhere very large. One-room schools were out in the country, so a lot of times the kids who went to the one-room schools lived on farms and ranches. Sometimes they would live several miles away, and it would be a couple miles each way to school. Now, a lot of times those students would just walk to school, to and from school each day. If they were lucky, maybe their parents were running an errand nearby, and their parents would take them in a wagon to school. Or perhaps if their family had an extra horse or two, the family would lend them a horse to take to school and back home each day. And so this would be where they keep the horses, maybe a little bit of hay and grain for them to munch on while school was in session, and then they would ride the horses home or walk back home after the school day was done. Now, by the time the 1920s and 30s came, some one-room schools had school buses. So they would be very lucky, those students who lived on the school bus route and got to ride in a school bus. But not always. For a long time, still the students would ride horses to school if they had an extra one, or usually walk to school.